Hello and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Brian Bernaman is a world-renowned well-being leader, an expert in conscious living. He has a background in neuroscience and more than 15 years of experience in teaching and practicing yoga, meditation, mindfulness, and other healing modalities. Brian is able to synthesize modern scientific knowledge with ancient wisdom to help his clients get the results that they are seeking. He has taught hundreds of workshops all around the world and has empowered people from all walks of life to realize their full potential and enable them to live a stress-free and meaningful life. Brian is the co-founder of Conscious Action, a movement of people committed to living more intentionally, and is the host of the podcast with that same name. He also founded You Being You, offering practical and lifelong well-being pathways for heart-connected and conscious living. Brian, it's such an honor to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you so much, Casey, for having me, and so blessed to be able to be having this conversation with you.
Absolutely. We're totally honored. We would love to hear your personal story, but we're going to jump way ahead. Bethany, my wife, loves basketball, and I live just outside of Salt Lake City in Utah. So for sure, I love basketball. We are so diehard Jazz fans here in the state. But Bethany didn't grow up here, and her favorite team was the Miami Heat, and especially like in the heyday. And I understand you were associated with the Miami Heat when they were winning championships. Is that correct?
Yes, I was blessed enough to be able to as well grow up loving basketball and to in 2011 to be in Miami working for ESPN radio, and I was doing the production of the games. So I was doing it for the part of the Spanish broadcasting of the games, which meant I was there every single game. I was there in the locker rooms with LeBron James, with Dwayne Wade, with Chris Bosh, and the entire team. And it was such a weird time because I never imagined that I would be doing something like that. And it was for the city of Miami at that time. It was such an amazing period. There was so much excitement, and of course, then winning the championships and everything. But it was a really, really wonderful experience to be able to be part of that and to, in a sense, fulfill, even though I wasn't playing, being part of the NBA.
Yeah, that is absolutely amazing. My dad covers sports here locally as well, and he tries to explain that like sports are a little bit different when they're your job. It's kind of it's not like you're going to the game to watch and enjoy yourself and have fun, but still, like, come on, that's pretty enjoyable.
Yes, definitely. I know from my experience, I loved it. Yes, I was doing my work. I had to make sure that I was interviewing, I was paying attention, I was keeping an eye on the things that would be interesting for the broadcast, but I was enjoying it.
That's awesome. So Bethany had two questions for you. She wanted to know who was your favorite out of the big three, and she also wanted to know how they all got along day to day.
Good question. So I will start with the second one, which I could say I'm not sure. What I would see is really like the professional part, them, training and being outside. The parts that we were allowed in locker rooms, I didn't have, all access. So I wasn't able to see that. In terms of my favorite, I would answer that in different ways because I think that the best of them was LeBron James, but I could see that people there were in love with Dwayne Wade. Like, he was the heart of that team. And I think that Chris Bosh was actually the best player for that team because he was able to put his legacy a little bit aside and to allow himself to be that third player. So I think that between the three of them, it's hard to choose. I think that because I have a soft spot for team players, I think that I would go with Chris Bosh, actually.
That's so interesting. I heard a podcast with him recently, and he's definitely been on quite the journey and has kind of found some consciousness. And I believe he has a stoicism practice, and he wrote a tremendous book. And yeah, he is a very interesting person and somebody that hasn't really stopped trying to help out after his basketball career. So Yeah, that's great. What a great answer. Well, the podcast is about a little bit more than basketball, so I guess I'll leave that time in Miami. And let's learn a little bit about you and growing up. I believe you grew up in Argentina. Is that right?
Growing up in Argentina, just like any other kid, I was just was saying now into sports, into all of the typical things. I didn't like school. I had, a really beautiful and wonderful family. My parents were really loving parents. My extended family was really loving, and I have three siblings, so we got along really well, and we used to play a lot. So I had a really wonderful childhood, and then and I think that's something that is relevant to our conversation and to my life journey is that by the time that I was around 10 years old, my parents were starting to get much more into their own personal development and their spiritual practices. And once they started to do that, they slowly started to introduce some of those ideas and perspectives at the dinner table and with everyday life decisions. So little by little, as a kid and as a teenager, I started to get introduced to all of that. And by the time that I was around 15, 16, I was reading a lot of books around spirituality, personal development, and I was trying out different things that my parents would encourage me to try, like going to yoga, going to meditation, and going to learn about Buddhism. So different things. And of course, some of them I really resonated with, and some of them I didn't that much. But that's how my life journey started to change. And I'm so grateful that my parents introduced me to all of that at a young age, even though it wasn't super, super young, but as comparing to most people that are discovering themselves after they are 30, 40, or whatever years old, I was able to do this at a young age and to be able to explore my life experience from a different lens. And once I got into all of that, I found the practices that really resonated and the practices that I was like, okay, this is my practice. This is what I'm going to do, because for whatever reason, they just aligned with me. And little by little, I started to go even deeper in the Tibetan Buddhist teachings, especially Tibetan yoga and meditation. And for many years, that was my main path. Alongside everything else, of course, I still, went to university. I still, as I was just saying, went to Miami and was working like on sports production, like broadcasting. I was working in New York for the Fashion Week. I still lived in Berlin. So I was doing a lot of things alongside my practice. And in 2012, I decided to change a lot of things and to go a little bit deeper into the practice. And that's when life really took a different turn.
Wow. Okay, so it's so interesting. There's so many people in this space. It's almost like they have to have almost like a childhood trauma to really shake them up and create such chaos that they have to deal with it later on in life, and that's how they find a conscious practice. It's just mind-blowing to think what it would be like to grow up with all of these things in place. And you mentioned all those events that you got to do and all these experiences you got to have to be able to be present for all of those. Like, that's incredible. What an amazing experience.
Yes, and I'm super grateful of the parents that I have and the family that I have because of that, because I know, and of course, like I still have things that I need to work through from my childhood. It's not that, I'm exempt from that, but at the same time, I was able to understand much more and not to add into it. I tell a lot of times to people, especially, why are you waiting until you hit rock bottom? Why waiting until something really goes wrong before we are able to start a journey of healing and self-discovery, And whether we have it from the spiritual lens or not, having the opportunity to do that, because for me, I know that was my path. My path was one that it wasn't that things were super bad and then I turned into spirituality or into a practice because I needed that. For me, this was like, wow, there's more to life. What's that more? And let's explore it.
I love that. You mentioned the Tibetan practice. I think I know of a prayer where you ask essentially for an appropriate challenge so that, it's not too much or not too little, so that you have something that you're working on that is helping you grow. I'm wondering what are some of the challenges that you have had to overcome in your life?
I think that I have had a lot of challenges in my life. And at the same time, I want to put them in perspective. Comparing to a lot of people in the world, my challenges weren't as challenging. So I will start from there. Yet at the same time, whilst I was going through those challenges, for me, they were a big thing. So that's a lot of times something to keep in mind as we compare, in a sense, what is a big challenge or not. I think that some of the challenges that I had, for me, it started one, for example, when my grandfather died. I had a really close relationship with my mother's dad, and he suddenly died when I was in my teen years, and nobody was expecting it. He was super healthy. And at that time, I didn't really know exactly how to deal with it. And at that time, I was starting to discover all of this path. So I didn't have the tools yet to allow me to deal with it. So that for me was a big challenge, because in the moment that I remember being in the hospital and the doctor came out saying that he had passed, my body froze. Like I literally, I froze. I couldn't move, and so it took me a few years during my practice to also work through that, and then challenges of being able to grow in a sense in different ways, because I wanted to be a journalist, which I ended up doing that, but I was such a shy person. I didn't feel comfortable asking questions to anyone about anything. So I had to overcome that fear of speaking to people, and that fear of being in front of a camera or in front of a microphone and doing public speaking, which is something that now that's mostly what I do. And then I had to overcome a few times challenges, like financial challenges, especially living in different countries and having to deal with visas. So a lot of my last 10 years of my life has been run by where I was able to stay, because I was living in the US and then my visa ran out. So then I had to leave. The same a few times here in New Zealand. That is where I'm living now. So I had a few challenges like that. And then because I wasn't able to have a visa and I didn't want to work under the table, then I was running out of money. So, some interesting challenges that in the moment, because of my practice, especially this last 10 years, I was able to just go with them, not making them such a big problem, and just being a circumstance of my life.
What would you say would be the biggest risk that you had to take in your personal journey?
Oh, I think the biggest risk was actually leaving home. I was 22 and I was living at home with my parents, and I was working on the radio that already for 3 years. I just finished university. A relationship of almost 4 years ended, and I decided, I'm going to go. I bought a one-way ticket to New York with 3 nights in a hotel, and that was the risk. And that was the plan. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to leave. And that was the first time ever that I left home, not only to another like apartment or anything. Like I left the country, I left everything that I knew. I had no plan. It was a huge risk, but a wonderful one that has led me now in these last 11 years to have been living in different places around the world, getting to know different cultures and getting to know more of myself in a different setting.
It's just so interesting. And I'm sure you get this too as a podcast host. You ask people a question like that, and their scariest moments end up being the most refining moments of their lives. And some of the most important journeys they go on were the big scary ones. Why is fear such a driver in making our decisions? And why does it seem like it's so hard to overcome?
Because fear can be experienced differently. Some people with fear, it paralyzes them. Like, that response that we have, like the fight, flight, or freeze. We have that, and some people will actually go head on into those fears, but most people will not take that risk. And I think that why at the other side of that fear or that risk, there is such a wonderful meaning to it is because we did something completely out of character with something that the reward of it is huge, whether we got what we wanted or not. Just the fact that we took those risks is actually something so powerful, because there's a lot of energy into those moments. The moment that we are actually doing something like that, taking a risk, there's a lot of energy that intensifies that moment, and then it gets released, and that is where that meaning comes. Is that you were able to experience that super intense feeling, whether it was in your head or it was real, and then you did it. So it's like that stepping out of the comfort zone. That's where the magic is. It's that.
That's beautiful. So well explained. You've mentioned a turning point. You mentioned, 10, 11 years ago, something changed in your practice. Can you explain kind of how that process unfolded for you?
Yes, definitely. As I mentioned, I lived in a few different places, and as I was living this typical Western life, working and living in all of these different cities, and I was at the same time doing my practice. And I was finishing a contract in Berlin, in Germany, and I felt like I didn't want to continue working there. I didn't feel like that was aligned to who I really was. And as I was thinking, what do I do? Do I move to another country? Do I try to find work somewhere else? I said, actually, I could go to live in a retreat center and go deeper in my practice, go deeper into my understanding. And there's one place in Northern California where they teach this style of practice that I was doing, especially this Tibetan yoga practice. So I was able to get in contact through my teacher in Argentina with them. And then a few weeks later, I was there. I was living in this Tibetan Buddhist retreat center, and I lived there for a few years. And it really changed a lot because it allowed me to go completely into the practice. I didn't have any distractions other than what I was doing there. And it wasn't that I was, sitting in meditation every single moment of the day. There was a lot of work that we need to do, but because the intention of everyone there in the community, that were 27 people in the community, we were all working with the same goal, using the same practices. So we were all there to, in a sense, better ourselves and to do something meaningful and to practice. And of course, the space was beautiful in the middle of the mountain, full of redwoods, tree. Like the experience was amazing. So being able to go deep without having to care about money, or even in my case, that my role wasn't one of making food. I like someone else's role in the community was making food. I didn't have to worry about that. So I didn't have to worry about shopping for groceries or going even to the garden and picking them up. And I didn't have to worry about cooking. So when my days living there, all that I needed to do was be and showing up to what I was having to do without having to think, oh, I need to go and prep for lunch. I need to go and make lunch. I need to make this money, or I was able to be completely focused on what I was doing. And that gave me a really amazing lens that then I was able to transfer into coming back into society where all of those things are still needing to be done.
If I make you king of the world right now, and you assign every human like a 2-week break every year that they have to go and do something like that, what would this place be like?
Oh, I think that's a tough question, because I think that different people need different things. The one thing that I would say is a place that invites everyone to do what they want to do. So it's a place where there's no worries, like kind of like everything is catered for them, and all that they need to do is to choose how they want to do it. Because some people are ready to go to something like what I did, that is going to, in a sense, a retreat and being potentially silent and doing some practices. But a lot of people are not. A lot of people are there to actually deal with what they need to deal now, and are not in a space where they can go on a retreat and practice meditation. So, like sitting meditation. So a lot of times, different people need different things. So it would be more of an allowing more than anything.
I love that. I think it's so interesting with what you've been able to accomplish. I was never very good at this, where you experience so many different practices and you come back with Brian's practice. Like it's not this one thing and you have to follow everything that this person says or that these people did, 2,500 years ago. You just going out and having the experiences and creating what is best for you. And so I love that recommendation for people. How are you able to weave all these things together in a way that works in your life?
Well, I think that for me, one of the things that through the years I realized is that most teachings, most perspectives, most traditions are talking about the same thing, just in different words. Like at the root of everything, it's mostly the same. And what I understood for me was that some are talking more from an esoteric standpoint or more intangible standpoint. And some people, as I said, are not, that's not the way that they are ready to see that life or their life. So they need something that is more grounded, more, like that they can touch and do. So allowing ourselves to see that there's these different stages in our life, and it's not better or worse. It's just, this is where we are. What can we do where we are? So some people, when I work with them, we focus a little bit more on the tangible, on doing a little bit more exercise, or on the food that they are eating, or the way that their work is going. And with some people, we can, as well as doing that, we can touch a little bit more on their more spiritual side of things, that would be, in a sense, more of their feelings and their intuition and their perspective with energy. And one is not better than the other. It's just different ways of dealing with the same thing. And I think that as I understand all of these different perspectives, I honor them. And I think that for me, that's really important. As you were saying, like I bring my understanding. I don't teach things, or I don't share things that I don't understand. Or if I share them, I say, I don't understand it, but I have heard this. And I think that it's really important for me to be able to share what I have learned and experienced, and to be able to verbalize it in a way that makes sense for me, because that's all that I can share, what makes sense for me and what I learned. and at the same time making sure that I honor the lineage and the traditions that these practices came from. So anytime that, for example, I'm sharing about Tibetan Buddhism, even though sometimes I share it with my own language or with my own understanding, I say this is where this comes from. Or if I'm sharing something that comes from a perspective of family constellations, then that's where it comes from. I then make my own practice or my own understanding of all of that, and I put that together and share it, because everything goes together. There's nothing that contradicts each other. I think that the contradictions are just misunderstandings.
Wow. So you mentioned wanting to share this message. What did that look like when you left Northern California? How did you decide to execute that?
Well, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, because when I went to California, I went for me. I didn't go there, for being able to start teaching or sharing these things. I went for myself there. And whilst I was there, I started to, as part of my practice, I started to teach Tibetan yoga and meditation. And I was already doing energy healing and all of those different practices. And when I left California, I didn't have a plan, but I ended up, through synchronicities, I ended up coming to New Zealand. And here I started to come across different people, and I started to work with them, and I started to share some of these disciplines and these understandings that I had through one of my organizations, You Being You, with my friend Cameron Tukapua, that we started to create these different courses, online courses, and workshops in person, and classes, starting to share these different pathways that people can understand themselves through different lenses of different traditions. And then 2 years after that, I started Conscious Action, because I wanted to do more. I wanted to create something more that was focused a little bit less on that spiritual side. So it was a little bit more open to everyone that wasn't ready to see things from more of a spiritual lens, but to be able to understand that their actions matter, and to be able to live a more aligned and meaningful life. So I just started to share, and things just started to happen. It was everything really organically. I didn't plan them. Really, everything just started to happen. And one of the things that my teacher used to say that really stuck with me was that what you love, you share. Just like parents love sharing the photos of their kids everywhere, just like teachers go and do that because they love to do that. I love these practices. I see for my life how beneficial they have been, and I see how much a lot of people are struggling and they don't have these understandings. So my aim is to share them, and to be able to share that which I love. And unfortunately, I'm able to do that. Not everyone is able to what they are passionate about, to be able to do that for a living. So I'm really fortunate that I'm able to share and to explore all of these different perspectives and topics around what it means to connect with ourselves and to others and to the earth and the universe, because that is the main thing. Like, the biggest problem that we have is disconnection. And because we are disconnected from ourselves and from others and our environment, then we are actually behaving in ways that are not good for none of them, including us.
Yeah, wow. I definitely want to talk about conscious action. But before we do, you just used one of my favorite words, which is synchronicity. Can you tell the listener what synchronicity is, and maybe how they can experience it but not understand what it is?
Yes, definitely. I think that synchronicity is such a wonderful concept. And my understanding of it is that I'm just going to share some examples to be able to explain what it is. I was, for example, when I moved to New York, I was walking down the street and I came across my dad's childhood best friend that he doesn't live in New York. He lives in Miami. He was just there in New York and working there. And as we synchronistically came across each other, then I was able to start working and do things from there. And it's those moments that it seems that everything came together so that things happen. Synchronicity is when we can actually notice that the universe is actually playing in favor of making things happen for you. When there's one thing that one of my teachers said many years ago when I told her about something that had happened, and I told her like, oh, I had this synchronistically like thing happen, and she said, everything that happens, every single moment of every single day is synchronicity. You just are not aware of it. You don't have enough awareness to understand how that is actually the case. It's just the moments that we really notice. It's like, oh wow, like all of this came together and that happened. That is what is like what synchronicity is when we can notice it. But I love that explanation that my teacher gave me. And everything happens like that. It's just that I'm not aware enough.
Wow. I've noticed something with synchronicity, and maybe you can comment on this too, but I sure get a lot less synchronicity when I'm sitting around watching Netflix. And I get a lot more synchronicity in my life if I am putting out an intention and working towards something. I'm putting out I would like more of this in my life, and I don't know what that looks like yet, but I'm gonna go out and try to find it. Like when we were talking about like starting a business, we found the perfect person to make the logo, and they got it right the first time, and we fell in love with it and fell in love with the name, but none of that ever starts if we don't start having a conversation about starting a business. And so I really love the term conscious action. I'm wondering, do you notice the same in your life? Is that unique to me, or do we really need to put some energy and effort and intention in, and we'll notice more of those in our lives?
I think there's a few different things because there's different layers of how we experience life. And I think that this is one of the things that a lot of times I tell to some people, I watch Netflix. Like, it's not that I'm not doing anything that is from this world. And I enjoy that because as well, for example, you might be watching a movie or you might be watching a TV show, and it's actually sharing something about something that is going on in your life. So you might get an understanding of something that is going in your life, or that a friend of you is going through in their lives, just because a character in the movie is going through that. So I think that there is something to say about those moments that we are not actively doing something. But yes, I completely agree. The more that we put an intention and the more that we put our attention, the energy flows there. And it's much more easy to do that. For everyone that is listening that have heard of The Secret, and as I'm sure that you have heard of it, that is, the law of attraction. The law of attraction, if you sit on your house every single day, don't do anything, that $1 million is not going to come if you're trying to manifest $1 million.
What? Dang.
It's although, you could have a rich parent or grandparent or something, and suddenly they pass away and you get it. So it's not that it's completely impossible, but it's improbable that without us taking any action or creating or building any momentum for things to come to be manifested and to be materialized, then it's harder. I think that there's a fine line here, because as well, I see it, and I see this with some of my clients, is that because they're so used to this idea of action and doing, they are also not allowing. And we need to allow as well. That is an important aspect of it. There's moments that a lot of people are not used to just slowing down, taking a pause, like just stopping and not doing anything. And those moments are necessary as well. So the action is really good and the doing is really good to create momentum, and as well the being open to receiving and to allow those things to come. Because if we're always moving and doing and doing and doing, we might be missing out on those things as well.
This is such an area of struggle. In my past, especially, is understanding, like, when is it time to push? I want something in life, and so I need to, be a go-getter and go out and do it. But then also understand, like, when is it enough? When do I surrender? When do I practice the art? I would call it an art of non-doing. How can we tell whether we're pushing too far on either side of that coin?
I think that our body tells us. And this is one of the things that I'm super passionate about, is getting people to reconnect with their bodies and with the inner resources that our body has. Our bodies are incredible. Our bodies tells us everything. Most of us are not listening, and most of us don't know how to listen to our bodies. And I think that this, for me, is why I share a lot of times, a lot of practices that are about coming back to the body and allowing ourselves to feel. Because, we have a lot of sayings in both in English and in other languages about, following your heart, listen to your gut. And most people have no idea what that means because they have never actually experienced how does their gut talk? How does their heart tells them things? There's sometimes some moments in their lives that they felt something, but on a daily basis, most people are not attuned to their bodies. So I think that when we get more and more attuned to our bodies, we know when is the time for slowing down and when it's the time for keep on doing and keep on pushing. Now, there is something that I think that it's important on that to notice as well, and it's that for anyone that is listening, that is a woman, it's different. Women have to be a little bit more, in my experience, a little bit more attuned to their bodies because they go through faster cycles, weekly cycles. Women go through longer, slower cycles of change. So women need to pay a little bit more attention because this modern society is not made up for that. This modern society is made up for that doing, pushing. And it's not a society that sees really well or invites everyone to slow down or to take a day off or things like that, just to recharge or to restore their bodies and their minds. So I think that it's a really interesting space to be able to notice and to notice, how is my body feeling? What is my body telling me? And that includes your mind, but there's different voices in a sense, or things to notice in the mind to be able to understand what is my own understanding or my inner voice and what's not.
Wow. So you made such a great point that most people might go their entire life and, maybe it was a sunset or maybe it was a child being born where there's finally like this stillness and this recognition of like pure joy or pure energy or consciousness or however you want to describe it. Can you like practically decide to kind of tell us like what is it like to move through life in such a conscious way? Like do you, for somebody that doesn't understand this, what kind of feelings do you have in a normal day-to-day Tuesday where most people would just be in like pure chaos?
Yeah, I think that this is one of the things that it's really hard to verbalize because the feeling experience is a lot of times that's the challenge, that it doesn't have as many words. One time, one of my teachers told me, this is why we have art. This is why we have poetry, to be able to bring a closer understanding of what that experience is like. But to be able to answer that question, I think that one of the main things that for me changed my experiencing of everyday life was when I was able to go through practices that focus on being present in the present, which meant that I started to experience time differently. So to compare it, before, let's say 15 years ago, the amount of experiencing that I had in 1 year is the same amount of experiencing that I have now in 1 day.
Wow.
So my day, a lot of times, and I have, no way of comparing it in a sense with other people, because we're in, like, experiencing the same but differently. For me, 1 day has stretched so much. There's so much that I can experience in 1 day. Like I really, comparing to how I was living before that wasn't present, I had the same amount of experiencing in 1 year and now in 1 day, which means that every day is so full of potential and possibilities. And every day I'm able to make the decisions that I want. This doesn't mean that circumstances are, everything is perfect, but I'm able to be aware of what is happening and how I'm feeling, and to be able to choose consciously how I want to respond to life, and to be able to be present in my body, to be able to not react to what is happening, and to be able to be kind with myself and to be kind to others. And that doesn't mean that always happens. I'm still in a journey, this, until the moment that I get enlightened, like, this doesn't stop. But comparing to my life before, each day it's a wonderful gift that I'm able to experience, because I understand that the only moment that exists is this moment. And when I'm in this moment, I am in it. So I am here talking with you. I am here talking with you. I'm not daydreaming of anything else. I'm not pulled into my past of the things that I didn't do yesterday that I should have done, or that what ifs. All of that is pointless. And that doesn't mean that I don't ever think of the past. I think of the past just to learn from it. But I'm not dwelling in it. So I'm able to be here with you. I'm able to feel the energy of what is going on in my body, in my room now where I am. I'm able to feel and to be attuned to you and to this moment.
Man, I love that. That's fantastic. I've heard you ask this question on your fantastic podcast, and so I'm going to ask it right back at you. How do you define happiness?
How do I define happiness? That's a wonderful question. I think that happiness is a feeling. It's a feeling that I know for me, it makes my heart sing. That's how I can define it. And happiness, I think that should be one of the things that we are trying to achieve every single moment in our lives. So I think that we have a lot of times values upside down, and the things that we are doing are not taking us to that place. And I think that happiness as a feeling every single day, and for some people that might look like contentment, for some other people it might be more joyful, for some people less joyful, but to be able to stay within that space of that positive feeling in your heart and allowing that to expand through your body, that's such a wonderful way of feeling.
That's great. We talked a little bit about mind-body connection and mindfulness. How can we also increase our mind-body connection? You mentioned yoga. Is there a particular type that you like to do and one that you recommend for most people?
Yes, well, I do my main practice of yoga is Tibetan yoga. It's called Kumye, Tibetan yoga. And that practice has been the one that resonated with me and has been one of my main practice for the last 17 years. But for that, any kind of movement practice, and this is one of the things that I want to say is that it can be playing basketball, it can be playing football, it can be playing whatever, it can be running, any kind of physical activity that is done with full awareness. That is enough. It doesn't need to be a yogic practice. Yes, the yogic practices are created, especially the asanas or the postures or movements are created for a reason so that it moves energy in a way. But for me, the most important aspect of it is how much awareness are you bringing into that moment? Because there's people that are doing yoga that are less present than someone going for a run or someone playing basketball. And for those that, what I was talking before about how my experience has changed in terms of time and how we can bring this, for those that have played any sport and have been in what is called the zone, like if you have ever been in that zone, that seems that everything slows down and you're able to be aware of everything, that is the space. That is what I invite people to bring into their daily practice of whatever that is, whether that is more from a yoga spiritual lens or whether that is just a physical activity. If you bring this awareness into it and that presence into it, that's more than enough.
That's great. It's interesting to look back on the times when you are in the flow state because it everything does slow down. And I mean, really any kind of movement, think about like the complexity of some of the things that you're doing and feeling, and you're using all your senses, and you look back and like, how is that even possible that I hit that jump shot? I was, double teamed, and I took this pass, like the range of movement and proprioception. And it's just incredible when you look back and think what we can do as humans when we achieve that state. It's really magical.
Yes, definitely.
So how do you work with people these days? If somebody wanted to work with you, what does that look like?
Yes, I work with people either one-on-one. I usually, when I'm working one-on-one with people, I work on 3 weeks. 3 months. I try to make sure that we have enough time to get an understanding of what it is that we need to work through and how to get there, because we're all different. So there's a period that is trying out different things to see what works. Usually that would land more on the guidance / coaching space. Then I work with people as well on one-on-one cases with healing. So I do distant healing with different techniques. And then I teach meditation classes, I teach Tibetan yoga classes, and I do that online. And some moments I do more of them online, some moments I do less of them online because I prefer to do them in person here in New Zealand. I run events, and as well with some people, they go through the online courses, and that's the way that they start to work with me. So it's all of these different ways that I do that. And as well, I work with businesses and organizations that want to bring all of this to their employees and to their teams, to be able to bring well-being into their lives and into their work, and trying to connect all of these parts that from my experience, work can be that arena for that personal development. So those are all of the different ways really that I work with people, and I love all of them.
That's great. Yeah, so many different options. You live in a part of the world where the lockdown was probably one of the very most severe. Did the pandemic really change your business model, or were you already pretty well set up to continue doing online?
I was already set up to be able to do online offerings, but at the same time, of course, I do a lot of my events and my workshops and my classes in person. So all of that, of course, had to change with my clients that were here. Like everything went online, which for some of them is not the same experience. But a few of my clients, that were in Europe or in the States or in South America, like that was already online. So I was already set up for that. And it's just, for me, it is what it is. Like the circumstance is what it is. There's nothing that I can do. So I just need to flow with what is and to adapt and just go with it.
That's great. What a great attitude and positivity. And again, like looking at the things that you can or can't control. And, it forced all of us to do different things, but you were able to kind of continue with the offerings you had. That's wonderful. I'm always curious to ask other podcasters, what is your why for doing your podcast? What are you hoping to achieve from podcasting?
That's a wonderful question. Thank you, Casey. Yes, I think for me, one of the things that I wanted to do was at the very beginning, I wanted to create content that I was able to not have to create it in bite-sized portions, that I was able to actually go deep and have conversations and then putting those conversations out there for people to listen. So it was more of, I think that this is going to be a great conversation to have. And to talk to this person, to go deeper to their lives, their journeys, their understandings, and to be able to then share that with people. And part of it as well was because as I have been doing a lot of events here in New Zealand, all of the guest speakers that I had were people that were living here. So I wanted to expand a little bit more and to be able to have conversations with some of those same people, but as well with some people that are in different countries or in different cities here, even in New Zealand, that I wasn't able to have them in person. And I think that there's a lot of power in sharing stories. And by sharing stories, a lot of people can connect and can resonate and feel inspired and moved to take action in their lives. So I think that for me, the podcast is a wonderful, wonderful way to be able to do that.
I couldn't agree more. I always think it's funny when people reach out and ask me like, oh, how much money do you make podcasting? And it's like, I always have to laugh at them and say like, no, it costs a lot to be able to do it, but it's an amazing experience. I mean, look at us at two opposite parts of the world, communicating via speed of light. I would have never been able to meet you or fly out to you or anything. Like we're able to have this conversation and create this, beautiful piece of information that can hopefully help a lot of people. I think it's really, really an amazing platform to be able to explore some of that stuff. I want to ask you one thing that you are very grateful for today.
I'm grateful for this world. I'm grateful for this precious human life, and I'm grateful for you for having this time with me.
This has been an amazing time. I'm so grateful that you were able to come on and do this with us. We want to ask you also, what is one simple tip that you would like somebody to take from this conversation and apply into their lives?
One simple tip is to take at least one day every minute to slow down, to do nothing, just being for 1 minute, nothing more. Everyone can do it. Everyone has 1 minute, just 1 minute a day. Sit down, close your eyes, take a few deep breaths. That's it.
That's perfect. What a great tip and something we could all benefit from. Brian Bernaman, and where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
I think the easiest place to find me is through Conscious Action. That is where I keep a little bit more updated. So that's either on the website consciousaction.co.nz of New Zealand, or on social media, Facebook, Instagram, through the same Conscious Action NZ.
Beautiful. We will link to all of that in the show notes. Brian, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I can just tell your spirit of, giving and sharing and gratitude. It really shines through. And I've taken a lot of really good practical tips from this conversation. I know our listeners will as well. Just slowing down a minute a day it can be so powerful. Thank you so much for everything that you do and for all of your work and for sharing it with the world. We're really grateful for you and for taking the time to come be on our show today. It's been an absolute honor.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you for allowing me to share as well. So thank you for your work as well.
Absolutely. It's been our pleasure. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.